For years now, on Breakfast here, we've followed efforts to save the endangered orange-bellied parrot. The parrot calls Tasmania home, but spends the winter on the south coast of the mainland. In 2006, we reported there were just 200 of the birds left in the wild. Now, figures have been released showing that just 21 parrots remain in the wild, including only 8 females. Wildlife experts say it would be devastating to lose the parrot, but now, even with a captive breeding project, that possibility seems very real. Peter McGlone is the director of the Tasmanian Conservation Trust. He joins you from Hobart this morning. Peter, welcome to RM Breakfast.
Good morning, friend.
So from 200 in 2006 to 21 now, is drought the primary reason for the parrot being on the brink of extinction?
I think historically the reason the species became endangered is a combination of drought in the mainland, habitat loss again in the mainland, even in the distant past collection for people who wanted to sell them. But the problem in recent years, I guess, is a collection of factors, including the fact that with any endangered species that gets to really low numbers, they face problems of dealing with just normal natural problems. So they might die in a storm crossing Bass Strait, they may get taken by predators, and they have real difficulty recovering. And that's probably due to the fact that their genetics is much narrower than it should be. It seems that the problem in recent years, the key factor that's triggered this real alert, is that maybe the captive bred animals that have been re-released aren't fit enough, and the female, and this is a bit of educated guess by the experts, the females are probably turning those poor males down.
Because they're just not fit enough to be attractive.
Yeah, and what it means to a bird to be attractive and fit is really impossible for us to know, but some of these people have actually witnessed males looking like they're interested and the females not cooperating.
Okay, which goes to the whole notion of the gene pool being dwindled down, and just not being strong enough to be attractive.
Also the captive element that we've had to try and captive breed to pump up the numbers in the wild, and that's a risk with any captive breeding program, is you're playing with nature. You're putting animals back out there that are really not fit. You can never make them perfectly fit. You're taking a risk. And we're seeing the results of it. And
that, as you say, maybe making them unattractive to the females, but also you mentioned the crossing of Bass Strait. They normally fly to the mainland, the southern mainland, for the winters. You have to be a pretty strong bird to make it across.
Yes, and with any animal that does that over thousands and thousands of years, they would have also lost numbers of birds, but had a greater pool of numbers to able to recover from.
So, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, with any endangered species, when you get down to small numbers, you're rolling the dice. And if you roll the dice too many times and you lose too many birds, this is what's happening. We're getting down to extraordinarily low numbers. So the bird may not last to another season.
What can we do about this if breeding birds in captivity isn't the answer because they're not attractive to breed? I mean, what else can be done?
Oh, no, they haven't given up on trying to make the captive breeding more effective. And I sat on a committee that drew up a plan of action last year, and it's basically taking a bit of a high-risk strategy of trying to leave some birds in the wild and enhance their ability to breed, meaning putting out extra food, putting out extra nest boxes for them, which you may have seen on the 7:30 report, but also with the captive breeding, they're trying to work out a better food. They do some amazing things to try and improve the fitness of the birds before they release them. All sorts of, a bit like a set of games to get them fitter in the cages, but also just enhanced food source. And it would probably be fascinating to follow up talking to the people that are actually trying to make these captive birds fitter and stronger.
So that all goes to a fairly intense human effort, which costs money. Is funding an issue here?
Well, funding always comes up with the orange-bellied parrot. It's interesting that at the moment, it's getting $260,000 over 2 years from the federal government. That's not a very expensive threatened species project when you're considering that the whole future of the species basically relies on what we're doing at the moment. And very few people, when they see these numbers, ever think, first of all, of how much volunteer effort gets put into that species. I would say it's probably an equivalent value of volunteer labour going into monitoring the bird in 3 states, into a lot of volunteer effort coming from wildlife parks as well. If you withdrew that government funding, you couldn't get those people to do that volunteer work.
Yeah.
So it's really important to put that government money in. And the other thing people forget when they're talking about, supposedly millions of dollars going into threatened species. Threatened species get a tiny amount of funding in the scheme of things. In Tasmania, we have 700 listed threatened species. We have 4 specialist people employed dealing with threatened species. Now, there are other people that work in other parts of government that have a partial role, but 4 specialist biologists working on threatened species, and it gets topped up with funding like this orange-bellied parrot funding. That is way too low.
It's not much.
We should be looking at increasing the size of the pie, so to speak, before deciding is the orange-bellied parrot getting too much of that pie.
Peter, we've got to go, but just briefly, what would it mean if we lost the orange-bellied parrot? What would that mean for the ecosystem?
Well, we've lost a lot of species in Tasmania over historical time anyway, and people often don't really recognise it. I guess what we're seeing here is a threatened species that may be disappearing, probably is disappearing from the wild, in front of us. We're watching it, we're monitoring it, we're knowing it's happening. And I think it will be a wake-up call. It's a sad thing for the orange-bellied parrot. We should keep trying and save it. But if we lose it, it's a really sad thing. It's really the icon of the southwest of Tasmania.
Okay.
And I think that's what people should focus on.
All right, Peter, good luck with it. Thank you very much for alerting us. Peter McGlone.
Thank you, Fran.
Peter McGlone is Director of the Tasmanian Conservation Trust, joining you this morning from Hobart. Only 21 orange-bellied parrots left in the wild.